everyone, welcome back to today's show. I'm your host, Charlotte Stebbing-Mills, and today I'm joined by Matt Marney, who is a wellbeing consultant, podcaster, and the founder of Wellness Education Dubai. So welcome to the show, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. I sounded so impressive then, Charlotte. When you introduced me, I was thinking, really? Is that what I do? I'm amazing, Charlotte. I am super happy to be here and excited to be on your podcast. And I genuinely mean this. I'm a fan of this podcast. So I'm someone that works in the space. It's been super useful for me. So I genuinely mean it. I'm just honored to be on the podcast. And if I can add like, a little bit towards this podcast, I'm more than happy. So super pleased to be here.
Amazing. Well, we're super happy to have you here. We've obviously had a chat before on our other podcast, the Stress Relief in Your Pocket podcast.
Yes.
And I know I've come onto your podcast, which is the Matt Marney podcast, for anybody that wants to go and listen and check that out. Get that plug in there early for you, Matt.
Thank you.
But it's always a really, really good conversation. And I know there's so many nuances to corporate wellbeing, the wellbeing space. And you and I actually come from a very similar history when it comes to like our career path. And it's so fascinating how then we've both ended up in this space and kind of how that's come about. So I'd love for you to share with our audience a bit more about like, where have you come from and what's been the spark and the catalyst for you really leaning into the corporate space?
A great question. So I'll probably start with going back to when I graduated from university. So I'm going to give my age away now. 1998, I graduated, done my sports science degree. I finished university, and when I came out, I looked at jobs in the fitness industry, and gym instructors were on £10,500 a year. I remember it distinctly. So I got my degree, and a bit naive as well. I'm a working class lad, first person to go to university, all that stuff. On our level, I genuinely thought if I got a degree, I was going to get a six-figure salary. I'm not even joking. That's where my naive head was. Anyway, came out, 10,500. So I thought, right, I'll go and do some admin work because I'd done summer jobs in between like years at university after my A levels. So I worked in an office environment. My lifestyle wasn't great. I went to university, and as people at university do, came out of university, I was drinking. I was a smoker. Like a proper smoker, not even like a fake smoker, proper smoker. And I worked in an office. And long story short, I ended up working for a media agency in central London. And I thought I'd arrived. I was putting a suit on every day. I was getting on the train at Wimbledon Station with all the other white collar employees, and I thought I'd made it. So I remember saying to myself, "Wow, it was worth getting that degree." And I'd go to work every day, and it was. I mean, I shared a LinkedIn post about this recently. I've just recently started speaking about these experiences, and long story, I suffered from burnout. It was a toxic environment, and that's with my well-being hat on, corporate well-being hat. It's all hindsight. Life is all about hindsight. Pretty toxic environment, but equally, on reflection, my lifestyle was shocking. I was drinking too much alcohol. I subsequently stopped drinking alcohol. I've been sober for 17 and a half years. That's another conversation, right? I was smoking. My sleep was shot. I wasn't exercising. So the reason I say that now is because, yes, I firmly believe the workplace has a responsibility, but there is personal responsibility still a thing. It's still a thing, for everyone. So I chucked that in there because that's relevant. But I gave my notice in. I was very unhappy. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was all this stuff. I was in a dark spot. And I finished my last day, and it was lunchtime. I didn't even go back to the office after lunch. There was a lunchtime drinks, and I kind of sneaked out the back door. I didn't know what was going on. I was just struggling. And I was stood at Holborn Station platform, contemplating throwing myself in front of a tube. And it was like, that's where I got to. I didn't do it because it was my girlfriend at the time. It was her birthday, 23rd of November 2001. And the reality is I did the birthday thing that night. I struggled on. And I don't think this is spoken about enough. Like, we talk about toxic workplaces and the stuff in the moment, but there's a legacy. This stuff can hang around for a long time. And I suffered that. That experience traumatized me for a long time. And there were in the months after that, finishing that job, I was unemployed. There was no executive function. I was deep limbic system. We talk about the stress. My nervous system was fried. There was no space for rational thinking. And there was 2 failed suicide attempts. So it's like when people talk to me about mental health and the reason I do what I do now and I'm so passionate is because I've been there, I've done it, I know it. Now, silver lining, of course, we don't start with the doom and gloom. People are listening thinking, it's a bit dark, Matt. But the silver lining was
But before you
that
go into the silver lining,
yes,
like, thank you
yes,
for sharing that, because that is absolutely more common than what we would like. You know, I've been there. Our
100%.
listeners have heard, I think, my backstory before about wanting to take my own life as well. The struggles that go on, often silently, and there are so many people within organisations that might be listening to that are experiencing that, but also
Yeah.
people surrounding them that are experiencing as well. But it is not all doom
Mm.
and gloom. Tell us about your silver
No,
lining.
no. So yes. So after that experience, the silver lining was that I moved, back into the fitness industry. It's been my passion, my purpose now for the last 20 odd years. I love what I do. And just like you, and that's why I love talking to you, I started as a fitness instructor. I managed gyms and studios. I did personal training. I taught exercise to music. Yes, I used to do a grapevine. I could still do a grapevine. And I just love the industry. But what I also did during that time is I worked on exercise referral schemes, stroke rehab, cardiac phase 4 schemes. I just love this whole industry. And the first 10 years was, working in groups, but one-to-one training. And the same stuff was coming up, working with busy, stressed out individuals who want to change their body composition or lose some weight. And the same stuff was coming up. It was the same issues that I'd faced all those years before. They were still coming up. And you try and problem solve with individuals and you give them strategies around, exercise and nutrition and sleep and this stuff. Some people are really receptive to it. They're ready for that change. But life is life. And the workspace is people spend most of their time in the workspace. It's huge. So that's when I first clicked that actually the workplace is an area where real change can happen, or workspaces can help facilitate change. It don't have to be, it's not all about let's have fluffy meditation sessions and breathe, but what an opportunity, those 8 hours a day, what an opportunity for a workspace to allow individuals that do want to create that change, because not everybody needs it, not everybody wants it, but that's where the idea came from. So about 7 years ago, I started doing this standard corporate stuff in London for other organisations. I'd go in and teach a Pilates class or pain class, or and it was nice. We moved to Dubai and I carried on doing the same thing, and then the journey's developed. And yeah, so that's I still work in the fitness industry. I teach training stuff, educational stuff in the Pilates space. I just love all this stuff. I've got a podcast. I love talking about it. I love helping people, and workplace well-being. There's definitely a gap. It's not easy, as you know. You're in the space, but it can have a profound impact on individuals and organizations.
It really can. And I really believe in what you said there. Like, the workspace is such an opportunity to be able to reach people. I'm a true believer that if we don't learn this in the school system and learn really how to look after ourselves, and we don't learn it at home, we don't maybe learn it at university, there's other things we're interested in, right? Typically,
Yeah,
then the next place you spend the majority of your time is work. So if you, and most people don't get through those previous things I've described kind of clearly with the development tools that we actually need as human beings, like most people don't. Therefore, the opportunity lies in where we spend the majority of our time, so we can then take that home and share it then with our families to interrupt that pattern. And I think the workplace is a fascinating topic purely because it is a space full of individuals. And I think often we forget that when it comes to well-being. We forget that all an organization is lots of individuals coming together. And it blows my mind how quickly we forget that that's true and that we're all human, we've all got our own stuff going on. So I'd love to know kind of your perspective on that, and because you're like nodding profusely there when I said we're all just individuals together.
yeah. Well, so when I first started working in the space, I mean, I think Gallup have kind of labeled it well. They've got their 5 pillars, financial, social, community, physical well-being as a part of those 5 pillars of well-being. So when I first started, it was all about physical well-being, wellness, movement, nutrition, exercise. And that was all it was, really. There wasn't any talk of culture, policies, procedures, psychological safety. They just weren't words. And what I've noticed is that I've gone into the space, and this is very recent. I've been on LinkedIn, and I don't know what your views are on this, but I kind of observe what's going on in the workplace well-being space, and the fitness space has become And that's why I compare it to, because that was my background. I'm still part of the community on Instagram. It's so polarized. So you've got camps and groups shouting. Who can shout loudest? This is in the fitness space, right? So keto, low carb, ice baths, fasting, lift weights, don't lift weights, do Pilates, do yoga. And guess what? General public, really confused. Really confused and don't know where to start, right? And it's causing problems. And the narrative of the fitness industry is upside down. That's my view. And I shout from the pit, it frustrates me, right? Cognitive and mental health benefits of exercise, low hanging fruit. Every fitness professional should be screaming it, right? They're not. So that's the messaging. Seeing the same thing happen. And this is what it strikes me as the corporate well-being space now. When you're on LinkedIn, where everyone's sitting, it's the same thing. You've got like leadership coaches, mindset coaches, strength people. I mean, companies, when I speak to companies and we sit down and we talk, and it's a conversation. People say to me, how do you work with organizations? I say, like I'm working with a personal training client. It's the same thing. I sit down and have a conversation. What's going on? Like, you know? And I think organizations are confused. They don't know where to start and what to do. And now I'm not saying that everyone has value. We've got mutual friend, you know, Dr. Louise Lambert, positive psychology. She's doing a superb job. You know, she knows what she's doing. She's out there helping people. So there's room. But there's a lot of noise on social media, and I'll say LinkedIn because that's where the majority of the stuff is, that corporate well-being or the physical aspect of well-being doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay. And I see it and I hear it. And I think you're right to a point. The outcome measures are not good. So I quote Wellbeing survey organization this year. They were talking about physical interventions, engagement 20 to 40%, drop-off rates huge. The outcome measures are not great. Now I get that, and maybe we'll get into it later about how I think we can improve that. But just because they're the outcome measures, you can't just discard it. That's what frustrates me. There is like, of course it's about the work. Of course it's about managers being coaches. Of course it's about work-life balance, right to disconnect. I know it is now. I understand it's complicated and multifactorial, but you can't just bin physical well-being aspects. And that's where I get frustrated. And I'm going to say it now. Me and you have worked in the fitness space for a long time. We've worked on community-based schemes. I cannot have someone just shout boldly from the sidelines, this stuff doesn't work. Because I'm like, whoa, slow down. Have you worked on an exercise referral scheme for 15 years? No. Oh, I have. I've seen firsthand the majority of people who got referred on the exercise referral scheme, the hundreds of people I worked with, primary referral would be obesity, type 2 diabetes, asthma. Guess what's there as secondary? Anxiety and depression, mental health. So yeah, I get a little bit frustrated. I know it's not all about well-being, but like, geez, it's so valuable. So please don't discount it. Yeah. Now I'm on a rant now. I'm going to continue to rant, right? And then I promise I'll stop. So I use this as an example. And again, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on people who are doing an amazing job. There's some really interesting, there's so many interesting aspects. I delivered I still do stuff for general public. I delivered an introduction to meditation course recently. General public, people rock up, want to learn a bit about meditation. A guy attended the course. He came up to me afterwards and he said, I'm an emotional intelligence expert. I work in this area, I work in corporates. You mentioned you did corporates. Yeah, cool. Let's have a coffee. I was like, yeah, absolutely. A network, find out what you're doing. I might be able to bring you in. Now, I sat down in a conversation with this guy. And I'm kind of, you get to know someone, what's your background? I'm expecting, like, I don't know, worked in clinic psychology. It's like, I was a science teacher 3 months ago, and I'd done an online course. And now, but when you went on the LinkedIn page, I was like, so that's what I'm not trying to say, because there's good and bad in the industry, but that's what I see. Yep. I see a lot of that. And that makes it equally confusing for organizations because they don't know where to start. And I apologize, I've just talked far too long.
No, not at all. Like, and it's so relevant, and people might be listening to this thinking, yeah, it is really confusing. So we've just started, and you would have seen this probably on LinkedIn, that we've been doing these wellbeing masterminds, right, where we bring together different professionals. We bring together typically people who are leading wellbeing within organizations. Sometimes they're C-suite leaders, sometimes it's HR professionals. We had a finance director in there last week. We've got all sorts of different roles, people that are really leading the charge within their organization. But we also have some service providers that come to that. And it's not about selling or teaching, it's about collaboration, understanding. Because I think we become better when we actually start to understand other people's perspectives. Like, you understand so clearly how the physical relates to the workplace because of your background. But like you said, a lot of people don't have that experience, right? We're very lucky because we do. We've been able to connect the dots over the years, but not everybody comes from that space. And most of them don't come from a health space at all. So even the basics understandings are not necessarily there. And it's nobody's fault that they're feeling confused. It is just that the noise and being able to cut through it and to be able to then go deep to really get some context. And I think context is so important. And when we go on LinkedIn and we see these things, it is, okay, well, they've got the flashiest profile. Like you said, they're shouting the loudest, they're posting most consistently, they've got the most likes. That must be the thing that's right. And if we're operating from that principle, and that first principle of understanding is incorrect, then we're already setting ourselves up for failure. So one of the things that's come out of that mastermind that we're going to be hosting every single month now is that we're bringing together the context, and we're getting people to zoom out. A lot of the work that I do is helping people just zoom out and look at all of the factors that could be at play here. Let's just start there. Which ones create a little charge inside of you? Which ones are you seeing happening within your organizations that maybe are kicking up the most issues for you right now? Okay, great. How is that one linking to this issue over here? And then what is almost like an antidote to that we could try, test, experiment with, and see if that moves the needle. And just the zooming out piece and that initial understanding, typically of the difference between workplace well-being and employee wellness, it creates a huge shift, and it immediately builds a confidence, and it builds this ability to be able to say, okay, I don't know enough about this thing. Maybe I need Matt, right? Or maybe I need Dr. Louise that you mentioned earlier. Maybe we need Charlotte and her team to do this specific thing. And then we can start to move forward. But honestly, 9 times out of 10, most organizations, they have the resources they need within the organization. It doesn't have to be this big singing song and dance of a solution. And that's, I think, where we're getting a bit scrambled when it comes to LinkedIn, because there's so many posts about you shouldn't invest in this, you should invest in that, and it's like, oh, now everybody's got paralysis and not doing anything, which makes it even worse.
I know I keep making the references to fitness, but most people can identify that because they're all being exposed to it. It's the same on there. It's like people are debating in the fitness space about their modalities. Now, you shouldn't do this. This is not. It's like most people are not moving. So any kind of movement stuff that you can do to. And like you said, you pan out. And how do you pan out? You'd be amazed how many companies, they don't really know. Like, they're going with gut feeling. HR basing it on their subjective experience of the workforce, which is influenced by your relationships with people. You need to analyze this stuff. You need an engagement survey. You need a Gallup poll. You need some data. You can't just go, oh, I think, yeah, that people are complaining about X. Well, they're the people you're listening to because you're friends with them. You don't really like that person. So you've got to take, like, this is where you need a scientific approach. You need to take a survey, and you need to see what people are saying. And you need to get people to engage. It's like, I'm working with a law firm at the moment, and one of the guys is a client. He's the head of the department. They do well in engagement, but they're struggling to get people to fill out engagement surveys. Right? He's like, yeah, I'll send it out, Matt. Yeah, send it out, Matt. But no one's filling it out. I said, okay, I just made this suggestion. This is what I mean about policies and procedures. It's not complicated. I said to him, why don't you get your team together for a meeting, right? 30-minute meeting. Can you do that? Of course, I'm the boss, right? When you get them together, tell them why, firstly, give them the why, even on a survey. Don't just give people stuff. Do this. Give them the why, get them to fill it out together. Oh, that's a good idea, Matt. Do you know what I mean? And then and repeat, rinse and repeat. Highlight where the problems are, and then the work can start, and start small.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, there's so many different ways that you can do things, and it's very easy to get stuck in the old ways that didn't work before, right? It's the classic Einstein quote of doing the same thing over and over again, expect a different result, right? It is insanity. Exactly. But we all do it in some way, in shape or form, in our work and in our life. We're all guilty of that. And I think we often are in danger of almost shaming people that are in the roles when it comes to well-being, that maybe they don't know enough, or they've tried something and it didn't work, and then it's like, well, I don't want to try this thing again, or I don't want to do it in a different way in case it doesn't work again. And that again just leads into this paralysis and not doing anything, or doing the same thing over and over again. So I think we need to be careful, not just you and I in this conversation, but just in general as an industry. We need to be careful about treating then the people that are in charge of this stuff like they're incompetent, because they're not incompetent. They don't have access maybe to the resources or the safe enough space for them to even ask the questions. And that's another thing I hear a lot is I don't know who I can ask and not feel like an idiot. And because it's almost assumed that they should know the answers. And that's just
Well,
horrible.
I mean, this is the what you're talking about here, Charlotte, is what I'm so passionate about. It's like, let's say it's HR department, right? We all know now and recognize that organizations that are taking this stuff seriously, they're giving someone a role within the organization.
Yep.
It's not like you do HR, therefore you do well-being. I know well-being, like HR departments, schools I work with, they don't know, they've got other stuff to do. It's just been lumped onto their role. Yeah. Here's the thing, and I say this often, right? People view them as incompetent. Quite often, they don't know who to go to. They should be able to speak directly. It all comes down to this. If people at top are not buying in, it doesn't work. And it sounds so like cliche. It's just the reality of my experience of organizations. This is why when I go in, I ask who are decision makers, who are going to make these decisions. If people near the top are not involved, you can do a well-being day, you can do an off-site. It's lovely. Do a stress management thing. Let's do a class at lunchtime. The culture of the organization is not going to change. And that sounds really harsh, but like, this is the reality. It's the same situation. I come to you, I want to get in shape. Charlotte, okay, Matt, right, let's where we're going to start. But I can only go to the gym 30 minutes on a Monday. It's like, you've got to commit to this stuff. It's the same with well-being. And I think you're right. And I think people are struggling, people are not understanding. The noise is making it more confusing. Person in the position doesn't really know what they, this is why, like, people like you and me go into organizations, and it's not just about running educational workshops, it's like consultancy. I sit down with people in schools and I just chat to the person in charge, and we have an hour of my time, and I suggest ideas and we discuss stuff. And they use me as a consultancy because I think about this stuff a lot. So exactly, it's finding a balance, and there's lots of different ways you can do this stuff as well, which makes it equally confusing, and people give up. They don't start small and stick with it.
Exactly. And it is that, isn't it? It's the right, we've got this great idea, we're going to do it, and then the person gets busy, loses momentum, and then whatever the initiative is, it fizzles out. And then that leads into, oh, it wasn't good enough. Now there's not buy-in because there's no trust, and then it's this vicious cycle. And I think having
100%.
the opportunity to speak to somebody like you, somebody like me, the other brilliant people that are in this space, in this region, it provides a form of respite for them as well, and a form of understanding. One of the things that surprised me, to be honest, when we launched the mastermind that we've been running, is that one of the things they love the most about it is that it's a space where they come together with other people that are overwhelmed about the same stuff, and they can actually share about the things that are a struggle for them, that perhaps somebody else just doesn't care about or doesn't want to know. And it just, they leave feeling so much more relieved and tooled up to what to do next. And that alone, and that happens in, you know, a short space of time often, because of taking the time to listen. So I think listening, I think we can both agree, and based on what you said about surveys and data and stuff as well, is that listening is definitely a critical turning point that we can make when it comes to starting to improve in this space. Is that fair to say?
No, well, 100%. It's communication. I mean, it's a buzzword, isn't it? Like, you've got to communicate. Bosses need to communicate. It's like, no, the organisation needs to listen.
Yeah.
And if you're going to have a well-being group in your organisation, like, they need to be listened to. I know of two groups that I'm involved with
Yep.
in organisations, and they get feedback from this. They send it up, and it bounces straight back.
Yep.
And you go, okay.
Yeah.
So the listening has to come from the top. It's all that stuff, isn't it? It trickles down.
Yep.
But yeah, definitely, and staying open-minded.
Yeah.
Staying open-minded. And this is why things like this podcast are so super useful for people in the space, because what you've done is, I don't know how many episodes you've done now, but you've just gone, here we are. Do you know what I mean? It's like, there's quite a bit here, and there's definitely areas. And if we're listening, these are all issues, and look how many different issues there are. So it gives people space to breathe. Staying in your lane.
Yep.
It's something I've realised. It's like I do what I do, yeah, but don't blur the lines and try and do it all because it don't work.
Exactly. And that's the other thing as well, right? There are a lot of people out there claiming that they can do everything. So always question, where are people coming from? What's their background? What's their experiences? What experiments have they been running actively within organizations that have worked, and what hasn't worked? Because if they only tell you the things that worked and that they're telling you that it's all perfect and that nothing flopped, then run in the opposite direction. Because
I
in
know.
this space, we are still quite junior in this space in terms of well-being initiatives. And I think there are, like, don't get me wrong, like, it's well-being has been, part of conversation since at least the 1970s, as far as I'm aware. So it's been part of the conversation, but we're still very early in its evolution. And so nobody has the answer. Nobody has the magic pill that everybody is searching for. So to liken that to the fitness industry, it's the same behavior that we're seeing. We want the thing, we want the fix. And actually, we need to start looking in the right place for the right fix that we need. I always liken it to, at the moment we've like got a broken arm, but we're going to the dentist. It's like, well, don't go to, somebody around communication if that's not their skill set. Don't bring me in for a meditation session if policy is an issue or disrespect is an issue. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's really about coming back to basics in, okay, what is the real problem that I'm trying to solve? And that's another thing that's actually unfolding some of these masterminds we've been hosting, is it's all too big picture, or it's all too vague. It's like, we're trying to get engagement. Great. Tell me more specifically. What are you measuring? What is the hypothesis? What is it you're trying to achieve? And they can't answer those questions. So I think getting specific is also really important, but I don't believe we can get specific until we've listened to really understand what the problem is.
I mean, you said at the top of the conversation, you said all individuals are within this organization. And again, my approach to this stuff has changed. But and when you were just discussing that, it's like I'm thinking, where do I start? Because there's lots of stuff going on. But what I've realised, and it's reading, Gallup polls regularly. It's like Gallup, the surveys have shown that career well-being is top.
Yep.
And people go, oh, okay, career well-being. Every poll, it's there. So it's like, of course, the work is important.
Yep.
And we're forgetting that. Work-life balance, it's just life, isn't it? It's just one thing. And I know myself. I'll give you an example. When someone says to me, career well-being, but people went, oh, yeah, you should work to live. You shouldn't live to work. It's like, no. Some people, they get lots of purpose and passion. And I know for a fact with clients I work with and people that I know is when your job's going well, particularly if you're employed by someone, me and you, we're our own bosses now, so we've escaped that. But when you work for someone, when your job's going well, right? When you feel valued and the boss puts their arm around you and life's going all right, guess what? That permeates into all other areas of your life.
Yep.
You sleep better, your relationship's better with your friends and family, you're a bit more confident, you're just more confident.
Yep.
You're less limbic system, you're a bit more executive function, prefrontal cortex, and guess what? You perform better. So the work is important. So for me, the way I do it, so I'm doing a wellness thing in your neck of the woods, Abu Dhabi. I'm doing an offsite, right, with a company next week, and I'm going there for a half day, and I'll stand up and drink loads of coffee, and I'll go, hey, let's talk about the nervous system, and let's talk about neuroscience. And some people go, oh, connect the dots. Oh, that's why stress is a killer. You go, yeah. Then you talk about focus and attention, yeah, and and distractions in the office, and then you get on to the real stuff. So then you start talking about this stuff, and then you piggyback policy off the back of it.
Yep.
So that's what I tell people. So I can come and do education. I love that stuff. Face-to-face stuff is great.
Yep.
But then what? And it's for me, when I look at organizations and it's complex and complicated, and you need to bring professionals in if you want to establish, changes in management styles, you need someone who's an expert in that area to mediate and provide, better skills to boost engagement. But actually, right to disconnect. Like, most organizations, it's hideous.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that most organizations haven't got a policy and procedure in place. It just doesn't exist. It does not exist. So go in, deliver the educational stuff. Hey, that's nice. Then what? And talk to the HR department and C-suite level people beforehand and go, what policies and procedures are we going to work on? Small.
Yep.
Stick with it. Create a norm within the organization.
Yeah.
Once it becomes a norm and people are going to veer off the path, stop it, come back. It's not what we do. We don't email at 11 o'clock. It becomes the norm.
Exactly.
Then when you onboard people, it's part of the culture.
Yeah.
Do a small thing, do another small thing. And before you know it, you've got an organization which thrives and has got a reputation.
Yep.
And so I sell it to organizations sometimes. I say, how about let's forget all the other stuff? How about, and senior leaders love this when you go, imagine your marketing agency in 5 years' time. They go, oh, yeah, has the reputation, the reputation in this region for looking after its staff.
Yeah.
Imagine that. And they go, I know it's a bit of a fluffy goal, but sometimes it's like, it's not a bad thing to be known for as an organization. Like, bottom line, exactly. Attract and promote, like attract and retain the top staff before you even have to go into stats about how much it costs to replace a member of staff. You know, the ones when they go, pay them a good salary. They can just go. Oh, by the way, it costs you this much to replace them. Oh, didn't know that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Sorry, I'm rambling again, but
no, but it's right, and it's so on point. And what I love is the fact that you're simplifying it in a way that people can understand, because ultimately, one of the ways to get C-suite on board is to look at identity and how are you being perceived. That is a fact. Leaders, they want to be perceived in a certain way. Some leaders want to be seen as the big scary monster. Most leaders, the good leaders in my eyes, are the ones that want to be seen to be doing good, and they want to stand by that, and they want that to be authentic. So to bring that into, okay, what are you saying is true for your actual organization? What are you actually doing? What if your customers knew this about you too? They're more likely to stay. And there's so many other nuances that you can go into with that.
100%, 100%. I mean, I'm sorry to keep sharing, but I think it's so relevant. So, an example, I worked with an estate agency in the UK last summer. I went back for the summer. Friend's estate agency. He's got 3 offices, huge estate agency. They got them all together for an offsite, right? And it was one of those song and dance jobs. Matt's up the front. That's, we teach some relevant stuff, and some individuals really take from it, But we sat down. We had Pete, the owner of the organisation, there, and what we did was we brainstormed as a group.
Yep.
I find it so powerful. So, right to disconnect for this lot was just so important, because they're all on the WhatsApp group at weekends. They're all on the email list. So none of them are ever really switching off. Like, those synapses are given time to breathe. The brain is allowed to recover. So we sat down, and obviously they're customer facing. They've got clients, residential, sales. So there's a lot going on. So as an organization, they sat down and they thrashed it out logistically. How can this work? How can a team member, who happens to be one of my friends, how can he have time off and not feel obliged to look at his phone? So they sat down, they thrashed it out. I was back in the summer. I went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival last year. So I was up there with my wife, and my mate Terry came up to visit me for a few days, and he was on his annual leave from this estate agency. And we met, and in good Scottish fashion, we went and had a fry-up, right? And we were sat in a cafeteria. I was having sausages and bacon, and I said to him, oh, how did that corporate thing land the other week? Because everyone was smiling. You just never know if, the people at the top got value. He said, yeah, really good. Like, everyone enjoyed it. And I said, and did you implement anything? He said, yeah, the email policy has been nailed. Pete was there and said, this is something we have to get on top of. Yeah. I asked Terry, like, how's it going? He said, first time in 25 years that he's not looked at his email whilst on holiday. Yeah. And I said, and how does that make you feel? He said, I feel like I'm on holiday. And it was like this realization, Charlotte. I was like, oh, it is about the work. Yep. There is this other stuff, but like, because of this weird modern world with COVID, where blurred lines and, if you can educate and piggyback policy off the back of it, it tends to work. I'll say that. I'll be questioning that in 6 months. I'll be going, that's a load of rubbish. I've now learned something else. But yes, stay open-minded.
but that's it, right? And I think that really highlights what I said earlier around like going to the dentist if you've got a broken arm kind of scenario, right? It's because they found the emergency room in your dentist session to some extent, right? They literally came into your session, they found something out, and it brought something to the table. It brought it to light that they didn't even know was a thing. They probably never even heard the term right to disconnect before. So like what this is why I'm such an advocate for all of the different ways in which we can support organizations, because they all add value. It's understanding the interconnectedness of all of them is where we are going to see change. That's what I'm convinced of, at least. So like you, maybe 6 months, 6 years from now, I'll be like, well, that was absolute rubbish. But I'm completely sold on that because of the results that we see in organizations. We had a similar scenario, company here in Abu Dhabi. CEO was like, oh, we've been working really hard. So last weekend, I gave them all the Thursday afternoon off to go to one of the theme parks on Yas. Right. Most of the team, they absolutely loved it while they were there. They had fun. But really, afterwards, I was in there and I was just having a chat with him. Oh, how was your offsite? Because it wasn't part of the strategy or part of the plan. The CEO just felt really like the urge to do that. So, okay, cool, like, as you like. And they all said, yeah, it was really fun, but what they would have preferred is to have gone home early on that Thursday and spent time with their family. Or another feedback from somebody else was all well and good, but come back to work the next day and all of the workload is still there. And now my boss is being really disrespectful because it isn't finished. And so that's not like a happy story, right? But it highlights yet again, sometimes where we can go wrong and not really pay enough attention.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm a firm believer. And again, I'm not knocking wellbeing services, and I teach some corporate classes, make it convenient for people. But let's think less about giving people more. Like if someone's struggling with their workload, like an afternoon at a theme park is creating anxiety, then something's going on. And it's different for every individual. Take stuff away.
Yeah.
Like let's reduce the amount of unnecessary meetings, right? Because they are crazy when you sit down. Like Shopify, as someone I quote all the time. Shopify after 2022 introduced a policy where any recurring meeting with more than 2 people, so you can have a one-to-one with your manager, are banned. No recurring meetings. No these meetings where senior leaders stand up and it's all about them and their ego and they love the floor. It's that stuff. So they're banned, and there are particular days Shopify have said Thursdays, no meetings.
Yeah.
Get rid of like emails, like the ridiculousness of, I mean, I get into it in workshops where we talk about switch cost and they're hideous. Cal Newport's work. I love Cal Newport's stuff. I've just read his book, Slow Productivity. It's like so interesting. It's like open door on a Thursday afternoon between 2 and 4. You can walk in and speak to someone. So I think like if workload's an issue, then like you say, you've got to dig down and go, maybe our staff need help in the modern world with the phone and the Teams open and the Zoom open and the email. It's like people are not getting stuff done. Yep. So actually, as an organization, take stuff away and let's help support them. Because I don't even know if there's a word for it. Gen Zs, it's you have to be talking about this stuff. Yep. Gen Zs are struggling on a lot of levels. Yep. And the interesting information coming about coping strategies are completely different. And it's not Gen Z's fault. Yep. It's a combination of stuff. There's a book called Anxious People, John Headett. I'll send it to you. It's so interesting. But leaders have got to understand that like communication style and, work-life balance and things have to change because there's a generation coming through who have been socialized differently.
Yeah.
So they expect different communication. They expect more like work-life balance. And I'm ranting again. I've realised you haven't spoke for about 45 minutes.
This is super relevant as well. We've had some interesting guests on the last season of this show speaking about this. And something again that is so basic that anyone can get right is understanding the emotional state of the younger generations that are coming up and the challenges that they're facing. For example, like there was a lady I was speaking to recently. She is young in the organization, in her work life. She's, during COVID, she wasn't working, she was studying. So this is almost like one of her first roles. And she's relatively senior in the project that she's working on, given that as well. But the senior leadership are very short, right? They're very A-type, they're very directive. And she's like, they're just so rude. And I've been there when certain things have been said. And in my eyes, I wouldn't have thought that was necessarily rude. Okay, probably wasn't as wonderful as it could be. Could have been a more meaningful interaction before, but I certainly wouldn't have got offended by it. But for her, it was like her world was crumbling. And it was just like, okay, this needs to be addressed. This is very real to her and her experience. So it's not about it being right 100%. Or wrong. It's about that this is real happening right now, and there needs to be a bridge that connects these two people. And unfortunately, now they're having those conversations.
Yeah.
But sometimes we discount It's reality. And I think that,
No, 100%, 100%. Like I hear terms like, so I go into the local high schools and do stress management stuff around for the sixth formers, right? You know, and it's just labeling stuff, bit of meditation. But senior members of staff, like Gen X, my generation, are very much like they use terms like snowflake. And I think that's just not fair. I mean, this book, Anxious People, it's incredible. Like he goes into detail, social media, but so much has happened to youngsters, lack of play,
yep.
not playing with that, not figuring out stuff themselves, not
Yep.
being bullied, not being, I mean, social online bullying is different. But you're right. And these organizations that are not, like, these Gen Z is 28.
Yeah.
So they're not youngsters. 28-year-olds are in senior roles. They're capable people. They've been to university.
Yep.
And they're going to be leading organizations. And it's try and tell people.
Yeah.
So you need to get on board with this because you're a zombie organization. You're just walking into the apocalypse. And like other organizations getting on board, all the top talent's going over there. And before you know it, you know, you're going out of business.
Exactly. And also we're seeing so many young entrepreneurs that are smashing it. They also don't need to put themselves into situations where denouncing
they'll be employing the dinosaurs who are barking and drinking their lager at lunchtime. It's like, come on, boys.
They're smarter than that. but this is exactly it though, right? It's like now there are so many other options that they don't have to stay. You know, there's something we do with one organization that we work in based on how they were feeling when we started, that many of them wanted to resign. And we have this question, which is how many steps are you towards the door? And so every time we go in there, we're like, what's your number? And we have an idea of, okay, this is where they are. And it really helps them to check in with themselves to see kind of where they are. But also most of them have got a backup plan. Most of them are there because they are hopeful things might change, or because they are learning things and you know, they've got their other reasons, obviously finances and stuff like that probably could be in there, but most of them have got a backup plan. Whereas in the past, with a lot of organizations, people didn't have backup plans. It might be that they apply for another job, but typically you wouldn't do that unless you knew for sure you was leaving or you got the boot. And you would have your HR or your manager that would work on a professional development plan for you. All right. So they would say, okay, this is your career trajectory, if like, you know, because this is what your talent is, and they would help you work that out. People have got resources and access now that they didn't have before, and they're doing it for themselves. They do not need you anymore, like in terms of like the dinosaurs. So the dynamic is shifting.
I know. I say this a lot. You hear it, it's like this throwaway word. People leave managers, not jobs, right? You hear it a lot, and people go, "Yeah, I identify with that." And the stats are there. Society of Human Resource Management, massive study in America, thousands of people. 87% of people polled in this survey said that their direct line manager was a factor in them considering leaving their current role. Right, the way they communicate with them or their workload demands. 57% said that they had left their last job because of their manager. And it's like people are leaving, and it's like, and for me, this is the thing about management. Management's not, it's a coaching role. Managing people is a coaching role. And I'm not an advocate of sacking all the managers, but I think organizations need to support managers more. So if they haven't got, so I work with people who just naturally fit the mold. The guy I talked about who works for a law firm, he is compassionate, empathetic. It just slots into that role. He doesn't have to think about it. It's just his natural. I'm similar. When I managed gyms, I didn't even realize I was doing it, but I just wanted to make sure people felt happy and they were getting on in their career, because I just somehow figured it out that they were better in the job. They were going to leave one day anyway, but they were better while they were there. And it's like, if a manager, if their normal default isn't that, then support them. Send them on training where they think more strategically about how they can improve engagement. Make it part of their KPIs. Support managers. Don't just say, you've got to do this because it's important, because Charlotte came in and told us the value of this stuff. We now get it. It's like, well, you've got to consciously, you can't just leave managers, otherwise they're going to start leaving in their droves. And then you know, support people to support people, if that makes sense.
And managers are like, they are ones that are most significantly burnt out. When you look across the board, it's the managers that are highest. I think it's something like 60% is in managers.
Top. Yeah, they're getting sandwiched in between it all.
They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They are often, even if they're not the most compassionate and empathetic people, like they are often the ones that see the change that needs to happen but can't enforce the changes that need to happen because they've got like barriers somewhere along the line that are outside.
I know.
So it's
I
how.
know they take stuff up. They take stuff up. It bounces back, and then they've got to take it down, and then they're not happy. I know.
Yeah.
I know. So managers do need support.
Where do you see that going? So if we look to the future then, and we see, if we take on board some of the things that we've already suggested in earlier parts of this conversation, improvements that could be made, what else do you foresee that we could start to implement to improve things?
I think it's a difficult one. I wouldn't say one thing. I definitely think I think we need to. Here's the thing. I think we need to get rid of the physical well-being wellness programs don't work. We need to stop that. So
Yep.
stop it. Stop doing that. Right. What we need to do is so okay that Wellbeing survey I spoke about 20 to 40% engagement. The interesting stat is that 80% of wellness well-being solutions are generic.
Mhm.
When you see that stat, you go, oh, okay, there's the problem.
Yep.
So if 80% of wellbeing stuff is generic, it means no one's really been consulted. They're just going, we're going to send Matt in because Matt's lovely. He drinks coffee and talks a lot. He's going to do a stress session or he's going to do Pilates. Yeah. Guess who turns up? People are already active. And if it's a free class, people that are not interested. So we need to educate organizations about not just exercise, about the value of movement because it is off the chart.
Yep.
So Dr. Brendan Stubbs, who's been on my podcast, he's like a lead researcher in physical activity and mental health. I mean, it is unbelievable.
Yep.
And when I say this to any organization, I say, look, the knowledge sector, they go, yeah. So a marketing agency I'm working at the moment, sit down, knowledge sector. So what do you pay your staff? We pay them good money, Matt. Okay, what do you pay them for? What do you actually pay them for? Their ability to think, critically think, strategize, yes. Client facing, limbic system, yes. Cognition. That's what you pay them for. You don't pay them to sit there. You pay them for their cognitive value. And by the way, here's some information about if you help them, support them, get away from their desk at lunchtime, have initiatives where they can move more, then that would be really valuable to the organization. So I think getting rid of that, getting better feedback from organizations. And don't get me wrong, the work is important. Of course it is, career well-being's there. But yeah, let's stop that stuff you keep saying about what. Let's implement it better.
Yeah.
So this is something I say, look, as a personal trainer, as you someone who works in the fitness industry as a trainer, if someone rocks up for a session, right, it's the equivalent of this. This is what I think is going on. Person turning up for the initial session, right, and you go, hi, I'm Matt, nice to meet you. And they go, yeah, cool. You come here to get into shape. Yes, that's why I'm using you as trainer. Okay, on the treadmill, run a 5K. Oh, okay, why? Well, that's what lots of people do. They do fitness. Go and run a 5K. Of course you wouldn't. You'd sit down with them. You'd have a conversation. You'd find out their goals, their objectives. It's the same thing with if you're going to implement physical stuff in an organization, have a conversation.
Yep.
Survey it. Use this is another one. I'm going one more. But if you're going to use the Gallup poll and you're going to pay a fortune for it, pay someone who has the time to actually look at the information.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then implement strategy around the information. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. It's got to be applied.
Or we just wait till Gen Z get old enough and it all changes anyway. So maybe it's just about patience, like politics. Yeah. Wait, and then you know, Tory party get tired and they leave anyway. And we go back to a socialist.
And this is another part of the problem is that we're not doing long-term thinking. Right. And that's problems with governments, that's problems with organizations. It's we care about what's happening while we're here, nothing else, and not about actually nurturing the environment for what could be coming next. To keep this topic, I think because I think we should go down a big rabbit hole there, is what you said about movement, I think is critical, because I do think that's we've got two extremes I see that happening. We've got organizations that are new to kind of corporate wellness and well-being. They want to do something and they're going for the classic steps challenge, blanket approach, let's give everything to everyone. Or like the other side of the coin, which is basically the people that are saying, okay, we've learned that physical doesn't work, and we're listening to all this noise. It's all mindset. It's all about how we talk to people, and that's the only thing that matters. And we've got like those sides. If we think of that as like a coin, at least they've got both sides of the coin. But then we've got the edge. The people that are on the edge of the coin, they're the ones that are understanding that it's all important, it's all necessary. And those, I think, are the smart people that are listening to this episode, because if you wasn't on that edge, you would not be entertaining this conversation. So anybody listening to this is very aware. And a really easy way I found for organizations to bring the movement piece in is, like you said, to listen and understand, but couple it with other things like walking meetings with your team, having treadmill desks. I've literally got a treadmill desk in my home office, because it's just an absolute,
100%.
most people don't have time to do the add-on thing, right? They don't have
I
time
know.
to go and
I
do the
know.
extra yoga session, but they do
No,
have
I agree.
walk whilst they're answering some emails, so
Yep.
like, how can we really sort of almost like turn that into an everyday part of the environment? I think is some of the questions we need to be asking around that.
Yeah, and look, and this is the thing. There's a guy called Richard Safir. He wrote a book called Cure for the Common Workplace. And Dr. Richard is a doctor, right? And he talks about, changing the culture of an organization, but just creating a healthy organization. So it sounds, because of the noise around it, it doesn't work, the physical stuff. It's like, you can still, as an organization, promote healthy eating, because guess what? There are individuals in their organization that struggle with food.
Yep.
Right, their leptin and ghrelin signaling's out of whack to most people. They overeat, they fix on food. Having cake in the office isn't supportive for that person. So you don't just have to rule it out. It's like, and who wouldn't want to work for an organization that valued health?
Yep.
Forget all the other stuff. You've got to do the other stuff. You can't bark at people.
Yep.
But I definitely feel like an organization that promotes health and well-being, that's just part of the whole gig.
Yeah.
You care.
Exactly.
And people buy into that. And that could be the difference, doing those walking meetings or doing the steps or the treadmill desk. That might be enough to encourage you to find the motivation to go to the gym on the way home. And, and then obviously you can get into stuff like providing therapy and healthcare. I mean, as we said at the top, this is a broad area.
Yeah.
It's a broad area.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's lots of scope. But the future, who knows? Just people like you, Charlotte, doing podcasts like this, putting the message out there, and just keep going out and promoting it. And actually, I think if we can, working with the right organizations, making an impact, and that impact being noticed.
Yes.
The biggest marketing thing is word of mouth. So if an organization is thriving, so this is the name of this podcast, isn't it? Thrive. I love that. When an organization is thriving, other organizations might latch onto it. They might go, oh, hang about. Our rival's doing well. They've got all the best staff. We just lost a member of staff that went there. What are they doing? They've got a chief wellbeing officer.
Yeah.
Well, what's that? Someone that just looks after this stuff. Yeah. Doesn't have to think about anything else. Maybe that's the future. Or AI takes over and that's it. AI does it all.
Well, what I'm hoping is AI takes over those monotonous tasks so that people have more time for people. And I think that's the way. I don't know whether that's the optimist in me, but no, I agree with what you're saying there. And yeah, we do have to remember that it is all one, big ecosystem, and there's a lot of things affecting each other. But movement is still important, and I know that's really important message.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
But another little angle, I know we're wrapping up here, but another angle on the movement piece is go back to your basics of how much you spend on health insurance and what are the top issues that people are claiming for, because I can guarantee that movement probably improves every single one of your top 5.
It's all your chronic conditions. It's your metabolic conditions. It's your obesity. It's diabetes. It's osteoarthritis. It's depression. It's mental health.
Yep.
And I would add this in. I know this is about corporate well-being, but I think the problem is, and I'm going to fitness industry.
Yep.
I've been ranting a little bit on Instagram because I teach the personal training courses. I'm doing this afternoon. I'm teaching an online Pilates teacher training course, right? Anatomy module. And I stress to them, this is the value. Don't go out there. And I tell them, scream from the rooftops. Like, this is the fitness industry's superpower, is the cognitive and mental health benefits of movement. No one's talking about it. They're talking about abs and backsides and glutes and macros and low body fat and getting smaller. And it's just like, it's crazy. That's okay. Here's your superpower. And if the fitness industry do it, they change their narrative, then maybe, because all these people in organizations are exposed to the same Instagram feeds. And this is what people are assuming it's all about. And it's not. It's like work that Brendan Stubbs is doing, which is just showing remarkable results in terms of cognitive function and performance at work.
Yeah, amazing. Matt, is there anything else you want to add to this conversation that you haven't already, that you think our listeners must hear from you?
No, I would just apologise. I've just drunk a massive coffee with 3 shots in it. I love caffeine. So no, my only apology would be that I've ranted too much for too long. But look, I think what you're doing, this podcast, is super useful for people like me. I think you're shining a light on how complex it is. And yeah, I just think you're doing a grand job. And I think in terms of organisations, if you're listening to this, reach out and have a conversation. You don't necessarily have to commit to getting a vendor in and delivering that. It's like sit down and have a chat. So people like you and me, I will have a consultation with someone.
Yep.
No charge. Like, let's have a conversation. Let's chat. Yeah, understand the landscape, simplify it so it doesn't seem all overwhelming.
Yep.
Break it down, like with fitness.
Yep.
Well, gradual goals, gradual steps.
Exactly. And on that, if anybody wants to find out more about the mastermind that I mentioned earlier, because these are the kinds of conversations that we're having in there as well, you're welcome to reach out for those, because I think it's a catalyst when you're around other people as well that are on the same kind of mission as you, even if it's for a different organization or it brings a different perspective. It can be a real game changer. And honestly, that mastermind has exceeded our own expectations of what's happened with it. It was just really just a case of let's get together, understand like where are we at, like what are the really real big issues. And now it's basically this platform where people are like coming together to really create change across the region, not just for themselves and their organization. And that I think is a really powerful thing. So if anyone wants to be part of that, obviously you're more than welcome to. And Matt, I would love to see you there at some point as well, because you've got so much wisdom.
I was at a wedding. I was at a wedding last week. Otherwise, I'd have been there. I'd have been there with bells and whistles. And it goes back to what you were saying: conversations.
Yeah.
Conversations. This is what it is all about. It's like, where's corporate well-being? Let's have a chat. Let's have a coffee. Let's have a chat. Let's talk about it. And it doesn't seem so scary. Yep. And that person on LinkedIn who keeps saying that don't work. It's all about this. It's like, shh, stop it. Just let's have a chat. Let's all be adults and just chat about this stuff properly.
Exactly. Matt, listen, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your wisdom, your experience. Where can our listeners come and find you? You've mentioned you're obviously on LinkedIn and you're on Instagram, but how can they?
I am. Well, it's a weird name. I'll be changing that. It's Wellness Education Dubai. That's a bit of a mouthful. It's Matt Marney. Hop on the podcast, Matt Marney podcast. I do a bit of corporate wellbeing. I just talk about all stuff. I had an oral hygienist on this week. She was great. I had someone on talking about alcoholism. So I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery from alcohol addiction for 17 years. That's a big part of my life. I do work for an organization called Men Speak. So I facilitate sessions, men's mental health. We get together online and it's just men having a chat, having a conversation about mental health. So look, I'm just passionate about all stuff well-being. Reach out, email, is it DM maybe on the socials. But yeah, I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone.
Amazing. Matt, you're a legend. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode and you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
Then share it with a friend who you think might benefit.
Spread the word. That's how we're going to impact the world, by helping each other.
We appreciate you so much, and as always, unconditional love and wellness to you.